Whenever you come across a verse, a chapter, especially verse or chapter, especially chapter, and it starts off with and, but, however, therefore, wherefore, those are conjunctions, right? And you want to those are wait a second, it's carrying on something that was previously said. So here we find in chapter number 2, again, chapters, the breaking down of chapters and verses, they're not inspired. Okay, they're not. This is how it's broken up for us. So, a lot of times when we think that a new chapter starts a new thought or a continuation, it's like there were no chapter breaks in the Bible. There were only passages and books and volumes, and it was never putting down the verses or chapters until later on, after the Bible was already completed. So, having said that, we're going to go to chapter number 1 and pick up where it starts off at. And verse number. Obviously, you can keep on seeing it says and. I would say all the way down to verse number, it says and going all the way through, pretty much starting verse number, the whole thing. Every verse in chapter 2, if you look at it, chapter 1, as it is written. So it's continuation of the first part, verse 1. The voice of one crying in the wilderness. Right? John did baptize. Then verse 5, and there. Verse 7, and. Verse 6, and. Verse number 9, and. Verse number 10, and. 11, and. 12, and. Now, and. Now, and. But, but, and. The whole way down, you're trying to find a verse to jump it through. Where does it go to verse? Having understood that, look at verse number 45. But he went out and began to publish it much, and to blaze abroad the matter, insomuch that Jesus could no more openly enter into the city, but was without in desert places, and they came to him from every quarter. Look at verse number 2, chapter 2. And again he entered into Capernaum after some days, and it was noised that he was in the house. And straightway many were gathered together, insomuch that there was no room to receive them, no, not so much as about the door, and he preached the word unto them. And we stop and think about this. There was a time where they came and they followed Jesus. They came to hear Jesus. They came and they thronged him. It was so much to the place where his noise was blazed abroad about the matter. And it got to be where he couldn't even get to a certain place because everybody was there. Have you been so busy in a situation? Have you been so busy into in a matter, maybe at work, and you have so many people just gathered around in the way, and you're trying to get stuff done, you can't, and you almost have to come down to the saying, too many chiefs, not enough Indians, or too many cooks, or too many chefs, right? Look, too many cooks in the kitchen. Have you ever heard that phrase before? Thanksgiving time, Mom, how should you like? Go, Mom! You know, and as a get them out of the kitchen because Mama needs to work, right? Or here you find the same thing where Christ couldn't even get what he wanted to get done because he was constantly being thronged. People just flocked to Christ, and he was just like, let me go to a desert place. Let me go out in the middle of the wilderness because it was so noisy abroad he couldn't get things done, right? Look at chapter 2. And again, he entered into Capernaum, after some days. And it was noise that he was in the house. He didn't have a great big following when he came back in. I want to speak this morning on fickle followers, full of faith friends, and they're all kind of like alliterated here, full of faith friends and foolish fathers. And that's my title for this morning, and it's not really important because the titles are useless. But when you start looking at the end of the chapter, people get so involved into doing the Lord's work that there's sometimes no room to get things done. I remember we were down in Florida. We were at part of the sewing marathon for the church. When Revival Baptist kicked off and they had like the big thing, and Joe Major was there and Tommy McMurtry was there. I remember we were going out soul winning, and they put us in this area, kind of 3 or 4 blocks away from the church, and it was literally like, as soon as you turn around, there was somebody else there. You try going this way, and there's somebody else there. It was literally like you could knock 5 doors, and you bumped into somebody else. Your soul winning a marathon was 5 doors. And it was like they put too many people in one spot, right? There's too many people in one spot. And I was like, okay, we kind of broken this up. So then we were like, okay, we're looking over here. We see trucks in the doors. We look over here. There's no trucks in the doors. And we went over here to this apartment. And soon everywhere you went, there was just people upon people upon people. And you couldn't get anything done you wanted to get done. Because, praise the Lord, the doors had been knocked. But what now? You're there. You've got another hour left to go. And you're literally just twiddling your thumbs. So that's when you're like, okay, I'm just going to go out and start finding a new place to go. And you find out there's already people there. And it's like, sometimes you can have so much density of work being done that it just stifles everything out. Last week we're out soul winning and somebody goes, the church was already here last week on Thursday. And I'm like, it wasn't me. Well, fine. I'm like, it wasn't me. And it wasn't even a church. It was Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. Because they're back at it now. Because now suddenly, the Lord can save in their religion now that COVID is over. Anyways, but it's like sometimes you can get so saturated with people around us that we just literally get so, we have to like spread out and go exploring. We have to go out and be pioneers and go find areas that have never been hit before and spreading out. But here you find that it was so noised abroad. People came from all over just to hear Jesus. His noise was made abroad about this man getting healed, about, in verse 44, about the leprosy, the man being clean. And then it says in verse number 45, it says that he went out and began to publish it much. He put in the newspapers, put on Facebook, he put on social media, Twitter, he put on YouTube, he put all these different social media blasts. And soon it got to be where Jesus couldn't even post anything, Jesus couldn't say anything, Jesus couldn't preach anything, because it was literally so much. No, he didn't really use social media, but use my imagination, okay? I'm trying to use it, Mike. I'm trying to be descriptive to this day and age, all right? Just don't give me thumbs down and don't unsubscribe. But then they got to be so much of a following that then it became to a place where they lost its luster. It got to be really bandwagon fast, and then it fizzled off. It bandwagon fast as, hey, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Super Bowl, and now it's already fizzled out to what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers. They started fizzling out, starting out fast about, hey, this new sports team, or hey, this new movie, or this new restaurant, or this new whatever, this new fad. The water bottle flip, right? I mean, that's old. That's old now, right? What's the new thing out? Fidget blocks. I was across the booth from this kid, and they had fidget popper things, and then they had like fidget blocks. A month ago, these fidget blocks were all the rage. The kid got the fidget block. He goes, "Oh, these are so old." And I'm like, "It's been out for a month." Remember when Tide Pods were a big rage? And it came out in the wash. But it's like, here they this weird nonsense. What's the next biggest fad? Here you find Jesus being this fad that people came to, and they literally went away from it. Look at chapter 2 again. And again, he entered into Capernaum after some days. How long did it take? Some. Didn't say many. Didn't say few. Didn't say 2. Didn't say 3. It said some. After some days, it was noised that he was in the house. And then, verse number 2 uses an interesting word, straightway. And then people came back in rage. Well, if they were all into it and really following Jesus and really interested in hanging on to Jesus' every word, when did they follow Jesus to the wilderness? When did they follow Jesus everywhere he went? But they didn't. They were fickle. Christ lost the luster. It was bandwagon Christianity. Go to Deuteronomy chapter number 4. Deuteronomy chapter number 4. Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, whatever. Fifth book. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. There you go, Deuteronomy. That's going to make YouTube. Deuteronomy chapter number 4. In verse number 27. And the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be left few in number among the heathen, whither the Lord shall lead you, and there ye shall serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But if from thence thou shalt seek the Lord thy God, thou shalt find him. If thou seek him with all thy heart, and with all thy soul. When thou art in tribulation, and all these things come upon thee, even from the latter days, if thou wilt turn to the Lord thy God, and shall be obedient unto his voice, For the Lord thy God is a merciful God. Aren't you glad for that? He will not forsake thee, neither destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers which he sware to them. For ask now in the days that are past, which were before thee, since the day that God created man upon the earth, and ask from one side of heaven unto the other, whether there has been any such thing as this great thing is, or hath been heard, or hath been heard like it. Did ever people hear the voice of God speak out of the midst of a fire, as thou hast heard, and live? Or hath God essayed to go and take him a nation from amidst of another nation, by temptations, by signs, by wonders, and by war, and by mighty hand, and by stretched out arm, and by great terrors, according to all that the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes? Unto thee it was showed that thou mightest know the Lord, that he is God. There is none else beside him. If you want to look for Jesus, if you're looking for him, you'll find him if you search for him with all your heart. Now understand this. He wasn't saying this to unbelievers. He was saying this to the believers. He was saying this to people who were forced to serve other gods. He's like, but hey, if you come after your God, your Lord, your God. He was going back and being specific that it's not talking about the unsaved, but towards those believers. You remember in Matthew chapter 24, they're saying, hey, if you hear that Jesus is in the wilderness, that the Son of Man is in the Messiah cometh, the Christ cometh, and he's in the desert, go not there. He's not there. Right? But here's these people that are looking high and low. And it's very interesting because Matthew 24 uses that, and it references back to Deuteronomy chapter 4 about how to search for God. In the middle of the tribulation, how to search for God. It's kind of interesting, right? Because we're not supposed to be in the tribulation. But look at Jeremiah chapter number 29, verse number 10. Jeremiah 29, verse 10 through 13. For thus saith the Lord, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you and perform my good word toward you, in causing you to return to this place. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. Everybody loves verse 11. Isn't it so wonderful, touchy, rosy? God's going to give us an expected end. Look at verse number 12. Then shall ye call upon me, and ye shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you. And ye shall seek me and find me when ye search for me, what? With all your heart. Look, God doesn't want you to worship him on Sunday mornings when it's a bright Sunday morning when it's nothing else better to do. God doesn't want you to worship him only when it comes to church time. God wants us to search for him with all of our heart. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, right? Put him first in all that we say and all that we do. Put God first. Not popularity, not friendships, not family. Put God first in all that we say and all that we do. That's where God. Now, herein lies a rub. The husbands, men, we're supposed to provide that of our house, right? If we don't provide for our family, we deny the faith, we're an infidel. There's a fine line of faith and foolishness. You remember John chapter 4, the woman at the well? She worshiped God in the way she understood it. But God said, you're so trapped up in traditionalism, you don't even worship what you know you're worshiping. But he says the time will come that you must worship him in spirit and in truth. That's who God wants to worship him, is those that worship him in spirit and in truth. Those that worship him, who follow after God, that search after God with their whole heart. But how many people do we know that are just fickle? The fickle followers just stopped looking for Jesus. They stopped crossing the hill and dale. They stopped abandoning their obsessions. Typical cult classics. They stopped following the things they knew. It was just another fad. But they stopped following it. I like to term it this way. They're a hokey-pokey Christianity. I mean, when you're in, you're in. Oh, you're in. You're shaking it all about. You're in. But when you're not in, you're out. And when you're out, you're out. I used to be addicted to hokey pokey, but I turned myself around. But they noised it abroad. How many do not know what hokey pokey is? Okay, good. Okay, we're still teaching your kids useless songs. They noised it abroad. They died down. Then they heard that Jesus was back in town, and it was like, you know what? Now I've got to be there. But it was like if they were seriously following after Christ and such a throng among them, Wouldn't they have also followed Jesus to the desert like they did John? But they didn't. It was a novelty. It was a specialty. It was a quick cult obsession that people had with Christ. And can I tell you, if that's your attitude toward Christ, is because it's the newest, greatest trinket to play with, you're not worshiping God. You're not coming to Christ for the right reasons. You're going to be just like those who came after the fish and the bread. What else can you do, Jesus? Do it again. Do it again. I mean, sooner or later, David Copperfield had to come up with new wax. What's his name? David Blaine? Is that the guy's name? And the magicians, they have to come up with new wax. Because everything's the same in the same moment. Everything's the same. The altar's open. It's okay. Look at chapter number 2. We're going to keep on going here. Look at verse number 3. And they came to him, unto him, bringing one sick of the palsy, which was born of 4. And when they could not come nigh unto him for the press, they uncovered the roof where he was. And when they had broken it up, they let down the bed wherein the sick of the palsy lay. When Jesus saw his faith, he said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. Is that what it says? No, he says, when Jesus saw their faith, he said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. Now, I want to point something out here. When the crowd thronged the place where Jesus was visiting, people knew that's where Jesus was. People knew that's where Jesus was. Here's a question for you. Do people know that Jesus lives in your heart? Do people know that Jesus lives in you? Well, yeah, I mean, they can go to my social media page. No. Do people know that Jesus is in you? Is it noise abroad? Do people around you know that Jesus is there? I mean, how else do they know that Jesus was there? He didn't put it on social media posts. He didn't put it in the newspaper. He didn't put out mail ads. It was noised abroad that he was there. So we find that the crowd thronged the place where Jesus was visiting. Now I've heard people say, and I actually preach against chapter 2 there where it says that they could not enter in because of the press. I've heard it preach against the media on that verse right there because the press got in the way. I've heard some really bad preaching on that verse. But here the people were just pressing in and they couldn't get through the throng. They couldn't get into it. But here you see men that acted upon their faith. They did all they could do to get the man to Jesus. They did everything they could to get this man to Jesus. Look at some things they had to overcome. They had to overcome the pressing crowd. I mean, they were so locked in, they couldn't even get into the door. They were so jam-packed like sardines, they couldn't get through. There was a present ceiling. Once they said, we're going to try the roof, they had to tear up the roof to where he was and let him down through the roof. There was a pressing ceiling. So, can you imagine how much effort that took to get that done? Then you also find the Pharisees' contempt. The Pharisees and the scribes and the hypocrites, they're always around. They're always around. By the way, did anybody notice in Sunday school that some of David's mighty men were men of Belial? Yeah. That David, the man after God's own heart, the friend of God, had reprobates in his midst. Did anyone else see that? Did anyone notice that? It's kind of interesting. But it amazes me how much it takes to bring a soul to Christ. It always amazes me how much time and talent and treasure and even tediousness it takes for a person to come to Christ. Carrying the man born on the bed, the man born of 4, got to the roof. However he got to the roof. Tearing up the roof, lowering him down to get to Jesus. It just amazes me how much faithfulness it takes of people who are full of faith. And Jesus didn't heal the man sick of the palsy because of his faith. He healed the man that was sick of the palsy because of the faith of the friends that brought him. The effort. Sometimes the effort that you take going out soul winning means more to God than you think. The effort that it takes when you got to go day after day, week after week, time after time. Maybe that one person cusses you out. And you know what? You're like, I'm not letting this one go. And you go back. Or maybe you just happen in the same neighborhood. You're like, you know what? I'm going to hit the door again. And you knock on that door again. Or that one person, maybe it's a nursing home. Or maybe it's a coworker. And you're like, yeah, this guy kind of treated me wrong the first time. But I'm going to keep on going back. Nevertheless, I'm just going to keep on going. But it amazes me how much it takes to bring a soul to Christ. Lastly, quickly, I want to show this thing also. It's about the foolish fathers. It's not just about the fickle followers. It's not just talking about the full of faith friends, but also look at the foolish fathers. It was not just the Pharisees, the scribes, and the priests. It was John's disciples as well. Look at the reasoning. Mark chapter 2, verses 6 through 7. Look at these right here in the Bible. It says this, "But there were certain of the scribes sitting there, and reasoning in their hearts, why doth this man speak thus? Why does this man thus speak blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God only?" They're sitting back and trying to figure out whether or not Jesus is of God. They're trying to figure these things out. Hello, there was a sick man that was healed. Let's not lose sight of the big picture here. Let's not lose sight of the big picture that it was a man who was sick is now healed. Let's not lose sight of what's going on. And by the way, I love the fact that they're reasoning within their hearts and Jesus can read their hearts. Very few times does Jesus reveal himself and it's all of his godhood, if I could say that, and all of his being God. He reveals portraits, snippets here and there, right? It says that, only God was entered the hearts of man, of those that trust him. But here, this man is sick and healed, but they're questioning whether or not this man could speak blasphemies. Who can forgive sins but God only? Well, there's a reason for that. Either your understanding of who can forgive sins is faulty, or your view of this Jesus is faulty, right? But here you find that this man sometimes these Pharisees, sometimes these foolish fathers. I'm saying foolish fathers as heads. They're the father of the nation. You're the head of the father of whatever. They're leaders. They're spiritual leaders, the spiritual fathers of this, and they're having a hard time with it. It's because they don't know what they're talking about, or they have no idea what they're speaking of. The sick man was healed. Don't lose sight of the big picture. Don't let the people around you lose sight of the big picture, what's going on. Good things are happening. Don't lose sight of that. You don't sit back and scrutinize. By the way, we shouldn't always have to try to figure out who's the newest heretic or who the newest reprobate is. Can't we just let what's happening be what happens? If it's not of God, let it go. Why don't we spend so much time trying to find fault rather than just let things be what they are? Let God reveal it. God is going to reveal it. If it's not of God, it will fall flat on its face. I've said that for 4 years straight. If it's not of God, it will fall flat on its face. Mark chapter number 2, verses 15 through 16. Here's the next time you see it. "And it came to pass that as Jesus sat at meat in his house, many publicans and sinners sat also together with Jesus and his disciples. For there were many, and they followed him." Now I love this part because the way it's mentioned in verse number 14 is that he meets Matthew, right? Levi, the son of Alphaeus. And he says, "Hey, come and follow me." He leaves the custom booth and he comes and follows Jesus. Verse 15, "It came to pass that as Jesus sat meat in his house." So I love that it's obviously, I believe it's talking about Matthew's house or Levi's house, but it's saying here that he sat in his house. How cool would it be if Jesus had a house that he actually sat and meat on? But then one time, at some point, he says, the foxes have holes and the birds have nests. The Son of Man have not where to lay his head. But here it says he sat at meat in his house. I honestly believe it's Levi, but the course of the text is saying it's Levi's house. But here it is. What if Jesus did live among them? And they just didn't know, didn't care it was Jesus. They only cared about Jesus when it was concert time. And he rubbed shoulders around them. You know who Stephen King is, right? In Venice, Florida. It's actually outside of Venice. It's in Osprey, Nocatee. Stephen King has a house in Florida. It was like literally 5 minutes from where the church we went to church down there. And you could meet. One time I met him. He was in Publix at the grocery store, and he was there. And he's like looking like Stephen King. Like there he is. And I kind of bumped his shopping cart. And he's, "I'm sorry." He goes, it's okay. I'm like, "Aren't you?" He goes, yes. Yeah, it's just whatever. Yes, I am. Okay. He was just kind of like, "Leave me alone." But here he is, writing these bestsellers, and these movies come off of his bestsellers, and all this. He's an author, a well-known person, and he's just kind of in there mingling around. And he's like, I just want to be left alone. Now, I'm not. It's like, again, that would be pretty cool if this is what Jesus actually had a house in Capernaum. But I believe it's actually Matthew. But still, people left Jesus alone except when they wanted to see a miracle. I mean, they didn't follow after Jesus in the wilderness. But it says here in verse number 16, and when the scribes and Pharisees saw him eat with the publicans and sinners, they said unto his disciples, how is it that he eateth and drinketh with publicans and sinners? If you really wanted to know, why don't you go to Jesus himself? Why did you go to the church members? Why did you go to the staff? If you've got a problem with Jesus, why don't you go to Jesus himself? If you've got a problem with me, why do you go to my wife and kids? And I'm not saying anybody here is, but it's an example, right? If you've got a problem with me, don't go to my wife about it. I'm approachable. Just not on days ending in Y. I'm accessible. Just leave a voice message or email, I'll get back to you. No, but it's like, if they had a problem, why did they go to the Pharisees? Because if they can go and cause doubt to the Pharisee, if they can cause doubt, the Pharisees, scribes, priests, if they can cause doubt with the followers, they would soon cause people to leave Jesus. They never go to the direct source. This is what trolls and keyboard warriors and people like that do. They go after the church members and not to the source. Come talk to me directly. If you've got a problem with me, man up, woman up, come talk to me. I'm approachable. If you got a question, come talk to me. Don't bring the supposition. But if you got something, come. Look, I take phone calls at weird times from weird people. Okay, and I can tell you stories. But it's like, just move on from it. Like, don't get stuck on that. Don't get stuck on, hey, well, don't go to the church member and say, why did your pastor do such and such? That's just backhand and underhandedness. If you've got a question, go right to the source. Come right to me directly. That's like asking the guy at the cash register why such and such is their policy. Or the person at the door asking you for a mask. It's like, the person at the door asking for a mask is not your enemy. Right? It's just, they're not the enemy. They're just trying to follow through a procedure. Go to the manager. Speak right to the manager. Someone posted on Facebook the other day about they had a policy and they lambasted everybody, scorched earth all the way to the management, and the management wouldn't give them any time, so they just kept scorching through all the employees. I'm like, really? Dumb. Anyways, but here you see that they're eating he's eating and drinking with his publicans and sinners. Really? Now we have the cool kids versus the unpopular kids, and the cool kids are pouting. The people who are who are up and coming, Jesus should have sat with them and identified with them, but he didn't. He went with the publicans and sinners, and now the cool kids are pouting, and now they're sitting back, scorning like middle schoolers in the cafeteria, sitting back with their carton of milk and trying to eating their cookies and trying to figure whether they're eating their goldfish and trying to figure out how they're going to get back at Jesus for dissing them and hang out with the losers and not with the cool kids. And that's literally what we find happening here. I'm turning to Aaron, but it's literally what happened here. But here, let me say this: isolation doesn't mean separation. We're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. We're gonna come across some dogs and fleas every once in a while. But it's not we're just gonna cuddle up and get the mange. There's a difference of opinion. We don't need to. We're supposed to cause effect in the world around us. We can't cause effect in the world around us if we're so isolated that we don't even know what real people are like. We have no idea what real people are like. There's a difference between haughty and holy. If you're so good you can't rub your shoulders to the people in need around you, there's a problem. But holiness is we're not supposed to be companion fools. Holiness is that we're going to keep ourselves pure and right before God, and our hearts and our minds inwardly and outwardly. Mark chapter number 2, verses 18 through 22. Here's another instance quickly. And the disciples of John and the Pharisees used to fast, and they come and say to him, why do the disciples of John and of the Pharisees fast, but thy disciples fast not? Now look at, we find that the Pharisees and the scribes have been murmuring this entire chapter, right? Because each chapter is an episode. So here we find this, here's this chapter, they're murmuring, complaining, but now they've added somebody else to the mix. Who is it? The disciples of John. Wait, now, time out a second now. Are the disciples of John evil, wicked people? No. Are we not going the same direction? Absolutely. Was not Jesus baptized of John? Yes. Was not John preaching and preparing the way for Christ? Yes. Then why are now the disciples of John yoking up with the Pharisees? Because they're doing something different than what Jesus is doing, and they want Jesus to follow suit. This is traditionalism. This is formalism. Traditionalism and formalism blinds people from seeing the presence of God. New and trendy doesn't mean more or less impactful. So there's things that we do at this church that are different than other churches around us. Okay, we don't have a big Sunday school push. We don't have bus ministry. We don't have extra ministries. That doesn't make us new and trendy. It just makes us say, you know what, we're going to keep the things that focus us on what we can do as a church, right? I know the food pantry's been a big lately, but it's like, you know what, the new and trendy doesn't matter. You know what, we're not going to go and we're not going to get purple walls and dim lights and smoke machines and get a praise team rather than us congregation singing. We're not going to turn that way. Not those things are evil, wicked, but it's new and trendy. Just keep the old-fashioned things the old-fashioned things. Okay, there's this old-fashioned thing. By the way, it used to be where pianos no one had pianos except for bars. And so having a piano in church to some is a newfangled thing. So that's why we go back to the accordion and guitars. Or not having any music whatsoever and just singing a cappella. There's that option too. But new and trendy doesn't mean that it's more or less impactful. There are some things that the new things are coming out that's just as effective and necessary, but it helps out. 10 years ago, people are flipping out because people are putting their sermons on Facebook and YouTube. Now, even the old IFB, the old fuddy-duddies, are putting sermons on YouTube because they shut the church down for COVID, for the scandemic, and now they're trying to get people back in, and now they're realizing, you know what? 10 years ago, we called these people cult classics. Now we should put our sermons out there. Because after all, this is new and trendy. This is actually worthwhile. This is actually making sense. We should maybe put the sermons out there for the next gen. We should maybe focus our attention to the younger crowd. We ought to, after there's some truth to it. There's some understanding to that. 20 years ago, if you caught me dead in church without a suit jacket, you would have called me a liberal. Now, if I wear a suit jacket, it's because someone here wearing a suit jacket to keep up with the Joneses. I can't stand suit jackets. I don't mind ties. I don't mind syphilis scarves. What I do mind is monkey suits. I don't like wearing suit jackets. They annoy me. They're too heavy. They're bulky. I'm sweating all the time. I put it on. I start sweating. I take it off. Why put it on, right? But some people, if you don't have a suit jacket on, you're not allowed on the platform. That's how people act. That's how some churches are. Ladies, you got to make sure you're wearing skirts. They cover you down to your knees or come down to your ankles, whatever. And there's some churches that are so detailed on dress code, and it's new and trendy. Look, I think we ought to keep gender, but the manner and methods should never detract us from the message. If your manner, how you behave yourself, detracts from the message, that's on you. If your methods detract from the message, that's on you. If the guy in the baptistry room, that's two. Anyways, so we didn't have that. So look at the faithless of the fathers. Purple lights is not as terrible as wicked, right? Okay, Colossians chapter 2, the Bible says this: as ye have therefore received Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk ye in him, rooted and builded up in him, and established in the faith as ye have been taught, abounding therein with thanksgiving. Beware lest any man spoil you. That didn't mean treat you really good. Spoil you means make you rotten, right? Through philosophy and vain deceit, after the traditions of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. There's a dependence on Christ. We need to have dependence on Christ and not after the sensitive seeker movement. Back in the day, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there was a book written about 40 years ago now. It was a book called The Purpose-Driven Church. It was written by the same guy who preached a purpose-driven life. And he just repackaged it to a purpose-driven individual, and it took off like wildfire. The first book didn't make much sense. The second book made wildfires, and now he's just ordaining women and everything else to be pastors. But this guy was all full-fledged into it. But you find here there were so many people who were focused after the seeker-sensitive movement. They wanted to be sensitive to the seeker. So they brought in rock bands. They brought in a coffee shop. They brought in, CCM music to play in the churches. They brought in smoke machines and tattooed guys wearing, guys wearing, skinny jeans and polo shirts with tattoos and, taking away the pulpit and putting in a glass podium and all these different things because we're trying to be seeker sensitive. But you know, all that's produced is this, the sensitive seeker movement. How dare you preach on this sin because it offends me? Oh, okay, so I'm supposed to apologize for preaching truth? And that's all that it's done. It's the coffee shop and church Christianity. That's exactly what it's become. It's the coffee shop and church Christianity. If you don't have my style of coffee, I'm leaving and going to another church. Mark chapter number 2, verses 23 through 38, you find that these people are so restrictive on the letter that they fail the spirit of law. Here's Jesus going out and picking corn, and they're having a fit about it. Because he was going out and eating, they're going through the cornfields on the Sabbath day, and the disciples began as they went to pluck the ears of corn. And the Pharisees said unto them, Behold, why do they on the Sabbath day that which is not lawful? And Jesus points back and says, hey, wait a second. Now, didn't David go and get the bread that was not given to him? It was only given to the priest, but the priest gave him the bread anyway? Was he wrong for doing that? Now, be careful now, because you're preaching against God's anointed. You're preaching against David. You're preaching against the king. Now, be careful. What you can't have your cake and eat it too. And they had a hard time with it. Look at, there's an obvious reason. Put the gum in your mouth easily. There's a reason for this, obviously, is that they got so restrictive on the letter of the law that they forgot the spirit of the law. Galatians chapter 3, verse number 1. O foolish Galatians, who hath bewitched you, that you should not obey the truth? Before whose eyes Jesus Christ has been evidently set forth. It's not hidden. It's been plainly shown that Jesus Christ is who he is. And you've been given the way of truth. What bewitched you? He was crucified among you. This only what I learn of you. Receive you the Holy Spirit by the works of the law or by the hearing of faith? You get so trapped up by the works of the law, you think that's how you got saved. Because you're so tripped up, you're falling down the wrong line. And then in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, he says this, Do we begin again to commend ourselves, or need we, as some others, epistles of commendation to you, or letters of commendation from you? Then he says down here in verse number 5, Who also have made us ministers of the New Testament, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter killeth, but the Spirit giveth life. Jesus is out there picking corn because he's hungry. The law does not forbid eating corn because you're hungry, because you're passing by. That's what the outside rows were for. They were given so you could eat corn. They were given so you could live off the land. But they're looking at it to such degree, thinking this is what Jesus is supposed to be, and he's not doing what Jesus. This is what a priest or a rabbi. This is what a father is supposed to be. A father of a religion, a leader in spirituality is supposed to be, and he's not fitting this mold. He doesn't fit our characteristics of what a leader is. So we're going to discredit him and cast all kinds of doubt and shadow among them, even to the place where they brought in John's disciples, good men. People who some of Jesus' disciples used to be followers of. He had followers that used to follow John the Baptist. And they start going in and start questioning Jesus' disciples and pinpointing them. Why? Because they're foolish. They're foolish fathers. At some point, you just have to literally watch and just see what happens. Sometimes you have to literally let go and see what shakes out. Let them be evidently manifested. Wait till look, if it's of the devil, it's going to be evidently manifested. But if it's of God, it'll be evidently manifested. So why sit there and pick apart something, analyze it before it comes to fruition? Sit back and wait. You know why Jesus said you don't cut down the grain and the wheat? You don't take the wheat out first or cut out the grain first. You let them grow up together and let it be proven what it is. Let it come to fruition. Just sit back and let it happen. Now guard yourselves, watch it, pay attention to it, but it's going to be evidently token to find out who are tares and who are not. Don't chase it. Don't push it. It'll come to fruition when it comes to fruition. But the foolish fathers, they have to exact power over people's life. They have to control the narrative. They've got to, something gets too hot on this side of the world, something gets too hot in this area, so they dangle something over here to distract you. I've been waiting for the past 2 weeks, I've been waiting for something to happen. I've been waiting for something crazy to happen. Waiting for either a misdirect or something to blow up. And right now it's misdirect. And I'm seeing it. It's big time misdirect. Okay, we have this whole thing going on right now with Afghanistan, right? And now we're going to misdirect. Hey, COVID over here is being proven faulty. Deaths, people who are getting the shots are dying left and right. Oh, ooh, shiny over here. Hey, this is proven ineffective. Oh, don't worry about it. CDC is so close to authorizing Pfizer's vaccinations that you can still get even though it's not been proven. We are the test studies. But oh, misdirect over here, misdirect over here. Everything is going one direction, and people are so just being used by, they're so fickle. They have no train of thought, and there's going to be a big blowout, and it's bigger than Afghanistan. Just wait and see what it is. I don't know what it's going to be, but when it does, it does. But don't get caught up in the misdirect. Sit back. Don't get caught after witch hunting. Just sit back and watch. Just sit back and watch and wait. And see it could get exposed. And when it does, then you can sit back and preach against it. But until then, sit back and wait and watch. What's really going on here? It's telling. It really is. All right, that's all I got for this morning. Let's go ahead and pray and ask God's blessing on our service. And then, Sean, is it ready? All right, we're going to find out real quick. The backpack. All right, we're going to find that out. Give him about 5 minutes, Sir Jason. We'll get it going, okay? Cool. All right, and you probably change as soon as we're praying. We can probably get changed and get you. Good. Yeah, cool. All right, let's go ahead and ask God's blessing.